By the way, that's Jeff. I'm Adam. And on today's episode, our topic came in from a reader and a listener. And they said, do we even need general contractors anymore? GCs are becoming middlemen in a world moving towards tech platforms and self-performing owners. And he doesn't think we need GCs anymore. I'm reminded of the phrase, a man who represents himself in court as a fool for a client. The idea of a self-performing or self-managing owner sounds dangerous to me outside of residential, even in residential probably. But you were a GC for decades. What do you think about cutting GCs out of the equation and having owners just hire subs and run it themselves? So Jeff, in the beginning, there were general contractors and there were trade contractors. And an owner hired a general contractor, and that general contractor typically self-performed a portion of the work.
A large portion.
They were typically doing the concrete. They might do the earthwork. They might do the framing, the drywall, the paint. They hired the specialty trades, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, to do those subcontractor work.
Licensed work.
Licensed work, but they would self-perform most of it.
Yeah.
And over the last 30 years or so, general contractors have transitioned into more of construction managers. They are much more we call them paper pushers, but they're much more organizers of the information. Yeah. They are the middlemen between the owner and all the trades. They hire trades to do everything and they self-perform little to no work. In fact, we have clients that are pure construction managers. They have no skilled labor. Right. They have office people and they might have project managers and a superintendent who manages and supervises and oversees work, but never picks up a tool. They don't self-perform anything. So our reader has suggested, asked, do we even need general contractors anymore? Could a capable owner do the same thing? They can hire some lawyers or a project manager, and they could directly hire the subs and become their own, actually act as a general contractor and not need a third-party GC, thereby saving the fee that a general contractor typically would charge. So for a small general contractor, that could be 10 to 15%, maybe 20%. And a large general contractor, they're usually working in that like 5% range, somewhere in that neighborhood, because it's a much larger project. So the fee is smaller, but it's a smaller piece of a much bigger pie.
Yeah.
So you were a general contractor for 20 plus years, and you know the value of a GC. You were a developer for a little while. Yeah. So you can see the appeal of not hiring a GC maybe and saving that money. If the subs are going to cost the same either way, why pay a markup on them?
Well, I wondered about the premise of the question. I wasn't sure if it was coming from I'm a sub and why do we even need GCs because they don't do anything? Or I'm a developer owner and why do we need that middleman? I wasn't sure where the premise was coming from, but we can talk about both.
Well, the listener didn't share that with me.
I know.
I tried to interpret it and gave you a couple of ways to think about it.
So I was trying to figure out what the premise was. So I don't know. I mean, I guess if I'm really honest about it, I mean, just that hurts my ego.
I'm sure.
And I want to argue well, of course you need the general contractors. What? Yeah. I think I could make a reasoned case that there's an ecosystem that the general contractor is taking on a certain amount of risk. Let's take this from the developer standpoint, okay?
Okay.
Let the owner standpoint for a minute. At the end of the day, really simple. The owner, developer, whatever they are, end user, they are hiring a contractor. All the contract says is you're going to build this for me. It doesn't say you're going to use subs. It doesn't tell you how to do it. No means and methods, just you're going to do this for me. And you're transferring a lot of the construction risk. We've talked about all kinds of different construction risks on this podcast. You're transferring all of that risk down to the general contractor contractually. The labor risk, the schedule risk, a lot of financial risk, et cetera, safety risk, et cetera. If you don't do that and become your own and that owner developer hires the subcontractors himself, you're also taking that risk on. So whereas before, in the traditional sense, your pro forma had, let's just say, 15 or 20 line items, only one of which was construction cost. You had one line item called build it contractor.
Okay.
Whatever. And the rest were soft costs, some other hard cost like design, paying your architect, et cetera, the land cost, all those things. But you only had one line item that was called contractor. You were deferring a crap ton of risk by saying, well, I've got $5 million to build this job. I'm going to hire a general contractor for that $5 million. And that guarantees, just like buying out a subcontract, I'm putting a commitment against that guarantees that I'm probably not going to spend more than that $5 million I just paid for it.
Okay.
Obviously, we know there's reasons why that could be not true, but conceptually, that's what's happening. I would think from a developer standpoint, you would not want to take that risk on, that you would much prefer to lock in your risk to that single line item, hire a GC, manage him, let him handle the 3-ring circus that can be a job site and make him own all that risk and hold him to account. You guaranteed the schedule, Mr. General Contractor, and you're running late. What are you going to do about it? I think from a financial risk standpoint, I don't know why a developer would want to do that. However, maybe they want to, start their own general contractor. They want to self-perform. In every case that I've seen that's been the case, they do that. They create an entity and then they put a GC fee on top of it. So it's just a means of making more money.
Okay.
So
they basically create a captive general contractor.
They create a captive general contractor.
Right.
Yes.
That only works for them.
Right. So there's still, the model's still there.
It's still, from a risk perspective, is deferring risk, and there's insurance that's carried by that, and that other entity.
Yes.
So that the developer is shielded financially and indemnified against that risk.
Let's also, exactly that. Exactly. And remember, most...
I'm just glad I got to use that word in sentence properly. I have such a hard time remembering where to use that word.
I was impressed, and I think you used it right too.
Thank you.
I don't know what I was going to say. I was so impressed by indemnify. I have no idea.
So the developer is now shielding themselves from all that risk.
Yes. In most cases, they're creating LLC entities for their project anyway.
Right.
So they're further shielding themselves from the risk personally by creating a corporate shield. They're saying, all right, well, we're ABC Development Company, and we're going to improve the land at 123 Main Street. They're going to create an LLC called 123 Main Street. And then they're going to, the only asset in that business is the land and the debt that you maybe went to a bank to get the debt or whatever.
All right. So I'm going to provide potentially an example where it would make sense to not have a general contractor as an owner.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
This is the one I'm thinking about. I'm a developer and I want to buy a piece of land that is undeveloped. It is green, and I'm going to prep it for, say, a subdivision. And then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to sell it as prepped land. So I'm going to buy it. I'm going to improve it by putting in a storm system and some roads and curbs, and sidewalks.
Yep.
And then I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
So I only need to hire 3 or 4 trades.
Yep.
So the risk to me is very low. There's nothing there to damage because it's a green site. If I got it permitted properly before I acquired it, and then I hired those 3 or 4 trades, I had the civil come in, I had the storm come in, I paved it, I curbed it, I turn around and I sell it. I didn't need a GC for that. It was low risk.
That's done.
I saved myself a fee.
That's done. That's absolutely done.
So
you're right.
And there's also a level of competence that I might have as an owner. If I've done this before, I might be able to navigate that ecosystem of doing a project without a GC based on size, scale, complexity. I think there's probably some threshold in there that if it gets to over a certain tipping point, more trades, more complexity, higher dollar value, now I'm going to want that gap between me and the general contractor. I want to offload that risk.
Yeah. Yeah. I was saying before that we're coming at this from the owner side or the sub side. If I'm taking it from the subcontractor side, do I want this structure as a subcontractor?
Depends on the project. If I'm doing I've worked for, say, I did a job for Texas Instruments and they wanted us to do a bunch of power and lighting in a new area for them to expand out as facility improvements. Right. They just hired us direct. They didn't hire a general contractor to do that work. And we liked that relationship. It was actually very clean. Yeah. I didn't have to go through lien waivers and releases. I pay app, got paid. I could invoice every 2 weeks instead of once a month. I didn't have to wait 45 to 60 days to get paid. So that direct to owner model worked well for me when it was a specific project. But if it's a new building, like we're going to go build an apartment complex, I might be not interested in building that direct for an owner just because I am going to be dealing with somebody there's no go-between, there's no middleman, and I might not know how to navigate that relationship.
All right. Okay. So
I don't have anybody to fight on my side with the owner. It's just going to be me versus him, and he's typically a lot bigger than I am.
Well, so maybe we can conclude that there are circumstances in finite cases when it is a finite scope, 1, 2 scopes, maybe 3 max that need to be managed. That direct sub trade to owner relationship can work really well. when it's more complex, when there's more scopes involved. So I'm continuing this thought if I'm the sub. It's really interesting. You said, you want somebody in between.
Sometimes.
Maybe.
I can think of a few projects where I was grateful to have a general contractor I had a relationship with because they were more on equal footing with the developer from a size standpoint, and they could argue on equal footing, where if I came in as a sub that was from a much smaller company, I didn't have the clout. I didn't have the weight to put up there to push against them too much.
Well, if you think about it.
And nobody to appeal to.
Well, that's right. So I was going to say that the structure, it is a shit rolls downhill kind of a concept. But if that middle person isn't there, most general contractor put flow down language in their subcontracts. Not all. They should do it more, in my opinion, but they don't.
Right.
There's certain indemnifications and different things that they're pushing down. Thank you.
Well done.
That they're pushing onto the subs, but not all of it. Some of it they have to take on themselves. So without that middle person the subcontractor is going to be taking on a fuck ton more risk than they were initially. A lot more that the GC is really pretty used to. They don't have to like it, but they're used to it.
Got it.
So I think that's something. I think that's a valid point. It's interesting. It's an interesting take. I was thinking about this a little differently. Also, GCs there's a trend in the business. So you're right. Most GCs these days are construction managers, right? They farm out all the risk. The pendulum's swinging back. There's a lot of general contractors that are moving more back toward that self-perform model, I guess, because things just do that. Mm-hmm. Things pendulum. And it's
cyclical.
Yeah, cyclical, pendulum, whatever. It's been a solid 40 years, maybe 50 years, depending on where you start counting from, since it started swinging. And I've felt it in the last 7 to 10 years. GCs are starting to self-perform more.
Okay.
I had dinner with a client just a couple of weeks ago. That's where they want to go. That's where they're going to take their business. They want to self-perform everything except the licensed trades. They're going back old school. They want to control their risk because they perceive subbing it to somebody is actually more risk, hugging the dragon and doing it themselves.
Yeah, I've run across a few of those companies in my consulting work over the last couple of years as well. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks. Yeah. I think we've figured out that we're not ready to get rid of general contractors just yet.
Ooh, thank God.
And they do have a place, and we shouldn't hate all of them as subcontractors. They can be really beneficial in a lot of ways. And if you got nothing else out of this conversation today, at least you got to learn how to use indemnify properly in a sentence twice.
A twofer.
It's a good takeaway. All right. Thanks for watching us on Construction Hot Takes today. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode.